Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Areeb Shahid and I am the founder and president of the Pakistani Students Association Coalition. A little bit about the PSA Coalition. The PSA Coalition serves as a beacon of unity, a bridge connecting Pakistani students and Pakistani student organizations or Pakistani student associations across the US. In these times of profound uncertainty in Pakistan, the PSA Coalition has emerged as a pivotal platform for Pakistani students both here in the US and abroad to engage in meaningful and constructive dialogue. Our coalition not only debates Pakistan's most pertinent and pressing issues, but is also focused on celebrating the vibrant diversity and rich culture of our country. Our mission is very clear: to foster unity, to inspire, and to engage in productive discussions, understanding the role we as students can play in propelling our country towards a future marked by stability and prosperity. Today's session stands as a clear demonstration of our unwavering commitment to understanding and navigating the challenges our beloved country faces, exploring pathways to peace and prosperity, and recognizing the role we as students can play. It is with immense pride and excitement that I welcome you all to today's crucial and insightful session titled From Boardrooms to Bureaucracy, Lessons for Sustainable Economic Development, featuring the very Honorable Mr. Asad Umar. Mr. Asad Umar, as you all may know, is a distinguished leader with a remarkable track record in both the corporate and public sectors. He has served as the former Federal Minister for Finance, Revenue and Economic Affairs, and also as the former Federal Minister for Planning, Development, Reforms and Special Initiatives. His extensive experience and profound insights make him an invaluable resource for our discussion today. This session also highlights our unwavering dedication and commitment to tackling the economic challenges Pakistan is presently facing and uncovering strategies for sustainable growth and development. With that and without wasting further time, I am now going to and delighted to hand over the floor to Myra, the Director of Political and Educational Affairs at the PSA Coalition, to open our discussion and to formally introduce Mr. Asad Umar. Over to you, Myra. Thank you.
Thank you, Areeb. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome once again to today's incredibly exciting session titled From Boardrooms to Bureaucracy, Lessons for Sustainable Economic Development with the distinguished Mr. Asad Umar. Mr. Umar's illustrious career spanning over 3 decades has left an indelible mark on Pakistan's corporate and political landscape. He has shaped Pakistan's economic outlook at both micro and macro levels, revolutionizing the country's corporate landscape and making significant contributions to national level policy development. Mr. Umar started his impressive journey at Engro Corporation, one of Pakistan's largest conglomerates, where he quickly rose through the ranks to become the youngest CEO in the company's history. Under his leadership, Engro reached new heights and set a standard for corporate excellence in Pakistan, particularly in the firm's employment of a new internationalist perspective. Mr. Umar transitioned from the corporate sector to politics, bringing his vast experience and strategic thinking to the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party. Mr. Umar has held prime party positions, including the coveted roles of Federal Minister of Finance and Federal Minister for Planning and Development. During his tenure, he worked tirelessly to stabilize the economy, implement vital reforms, and create a more inclusive economic environment. Most notably, Mr. Umar headed the National Command and Operations Center, the NCOC, amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Under his leadership, the NCOC became the nerve center for Pakistan's pandemic response, coordinating leadership efforts across federal and provincial levels to effectively manage and mitigate the impacts of the virus. Mr. Umar's wide-ranging experiences across core policy areas that today have become the center of immense contention and uncertainty make his perspective particularly essential to tackling Pakistan's current challenges. We are truly excited to have him here today to share his journey, insights, and vision for Pakistan's future. Our session today will be moderated by Nabiha Ahmed, an economist and operations specialist who has recently graduated from the distinguished Minerva University and who serves as the Director of Programs for the PSA Coalition, and Azaz Salahuddin, an undergraduate student of Economics and Middle Eastern Studies at Dartmouth College, who serves as the PSA Coalition's General Secretary. I will now hand over to Nabiha and Azaz to initiate our moderated segment of today's session. Over to you, Nabiha.
Assalamualaikum sir, thank you so much for joining us. सबसे पहले मैं बात करना शुरू करूँगी by asking you आपकी तबीयत कैसी है? I know you went through a lot in the recent past. So thank you so much for joining in, and how are you feeling?
Yeah, most welcome. The BA, it's getting better, but I'm still not fully recovered. So one thing we'll have to do is, okay, about halfway through the program in about half an hour, you'll have to give me just about a minute just to get up and walk around a bit. My doctor has said I can't say because I've got a problem with my desk.
Of course, sir, that's completely understandable. Please just let us know and we'll pause the program for that. Just, sir, I'd like to go back to your childhood. So this session is a little bit different. We're changing the format a bit. We're going to speak about you in the first half and then move on to the more economic side in the second half. So, sir, I understand that you came from a military background. Your father was in the military. And I was wondering what sort of a childhood did you have? Was it the typical disciplined lifestyle where, you have to follow a certain regimen and then you have to follow certain rules and regulations, or was it more of a freestanding, happy-go-lucky childhood?
My father was a very unusual Fauji general. Uh, he used to write poetry. One of his hobbies was to design jewelry. So he had this artistic bent in him also. And as a result, as a parent also, he was very different from the typical stereotype, Fauji father, dictation, you have to do. He gave us a lot of leeway. We made all our own decisions. And that's how I grew up. I grew up basically what did we learn at home? Intense commitment to the country, a love for the nation, which was bred into all of us, and the ability, or rather not the ability, but the expectation that we will do our best, not just for ourselves, but also for contributing to the country, and choose the path, whichever path we chose to do that. So as a result, you got to take decisions very early in life, make mistakes very early in life also, and learn from them. Because जब तक गलती नहीं करता उस वक्त तक इंसान सीखता नहीं.
That makes sense. And on that note, what sort of a child were you? Were you the inquisitive, or were you studious?
I'm the youngest of 7 siblings. Or youngest be gap between the second youngest and me, there's a 7-year gap. So I was the child, I guess, who was not supposed to be born. Uh, so youngest in the direct family and youngest amongst all first cousins. So I was spoiled rotten. I got a lot of love bachpan se. So what it does a couple of things for you. So it makes you very confident because everybody is around you is giving you positive feedback. So you get to have very strong sense of self-belief, but you also become very trusting because you're not used to negative interactions in the earlier years of your life. Everybody who meets, everybody who's surrounding you is being nice towards you, is loving you. So you become a very trusting person, and some people, including my wife, would say naive. So I was always good at studies. I used to be generally in the first 3 in the class, but I was never really into studying. I would much rather spend, and I did spend most of my time playing sports.
That's lovely to hear. And so I'm wondering, you were confident, you had a very strong sense of patriotism within you. Is that one of the reasons why you chose to pursue your higher education at IBA and not go abroad?
नहीं वो IBA वाला was more a question of economics. my my father could barely afford my IBA ki fees, and by that time, because this was Reagan had come in, and us वक्त the subsidies were starting to get removed from higher education, particularly for overseas students. So it was starting to become.
Sir, I think your internet connectivity issue.
I guess we can pause for a second.
Yeah.
I think he's rejoining, so this could take a minute.
Perfect, no worries.
No, you can't. Now you might be able to hear. Okay, I'm not sure what happened, but मेरा laptop से the connection went away. Can you hear me now?
You for joining back in. Acha, we were just discussing it was the economic considerations that made you join IBA, and Reagan had taken over, and it the education subsidies had subsided, and so it led you to joining IBA for economics.
Yeah. So I was just telling you, एक second, I have to now, I'm on my phone as well as this, so I'll have to switch one of them off. Okay. I am sorry, but
No worries.
Hey, it's fine. Are you using your phone for your microphone? Is that it?
वो नहीं वो हो ये रहा है कि I had logged on from the phone, right? So now I'm logging off from the phone, and that should make it okay.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
Perfect.
Yeah, we can just see your video for
So
laptop now.
I'll just conclude on that. I was just telling you that the faculty that I studied with in IBA, this was the original IBA faculty. These were the guys who were trained with the Americans initially, and a lot of them had been sent to the US to study and get their education वहाँ पर. And therefore, in my opinion, I got world-class education in IBA. And उसका test ये हुआ कि when I graduated, तो पहले I was just for a few months I was in Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, और उसके बाद I joined Exxon. Exxon में मेरा head-on competition जो था was a dear friend Adil, who was a Cornell MBA, and Adil's advisor was Mr. Behrman, जिसने capital budgeting की किताब लिखी, Behrman Schmidt की जो हम पढ़ते थे. So the guy who'd written that book that we were studying was his advisor. And similarly, we had Amir Murshid, who was a Price Waterhouse chartered accountant, and I had to compete with these guys who would come in with these world-class education backgrounds, and Alhamdulillah did reasonably okay.
You did really well, mashallah. Right. You just mentioned your first job was at HSBC, and you joined that straight out of IBA. I was wondering what the sector looked like, the job market back then, how early graduates navigated the job market. Was it based on networking? Was it based on just a simple application? What did the scenario look like back then?
80s was a very good time for Pakistan's economy. Economic growth strong थी. Multinationals operate कर रही थी पाकिस्तान के अंदर. IBA was by far and away the best business school in the country, and one of the few business schools थे, दो तीन ही थे, और उसमें से IBA was clearly number one. So IBA grads, so when you graduated, you had a job in your hand. So I was working within days of having graduated, and it was the same for most of the kids at that time.
Right. अभी आपने mention किया कि Pakistan's economy was doing great back then. In an earlier interview, you mentioned that you went from $100,000 salary, big house in Canada, to a sea view apartment in Karachi with 12,000 rupees as your salary when you moved from Canada to Pakistan. I know that you were a confident person. You mentioned that you were raised that way, and I know that you have a sense of patriotism for the country. But having been in the boardroom for Engro as a CEO, and then being on the other side in bureaucracy as a minister, do you think if Asad Umar as a child existed today, you would have made the same decision?
It's difficult, obviously, to put yourself in a hypothetical situation like this. So on the one hand, I would love to say, okay, I would have made the same choices even at that point in time. Because remember, मेरा जो childhood है, when I'm 10 years old, Pakistan breaks into two. So there is deep, dark depression in the country. People are feeling very insecure about the future. You're hearing all around you कि ये तो मुल्क ही नहीं बचेगा. So that's the bachpan that I saw. Okay, so it isn't this negative or pessimism, but आजकल की जो situation है in terms of a job market, etc., it's a much tougher situation. So I can understand that youngsters at this point in time would be more hesitant to come back to Pakistan. and look for opportunities here in the country if they got good jobs overseas. I think that difference is definitely there. And by the way, I run into kids and airports, at dinners, will come up to me. He says, "Sir, मैं आप लोगों की वजह से मैं पाकिस्तान वापस आया था. देखें अब क्या मुल्क की हालत हो गए. And now I'm not looking for a job abroad."
Right. And on that note, since this is a student organization and we have majority of our audience are students, I'm wondering, regardless of whether students are searching for jobs in Pakistan or abroad, what are certain things that they should look at, especially within the corporate field, before choosing where to work?
अच्छा, जो इनिशियल जो आपकी जॉब्स है ना, उसके अंदर द सिंगल मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट क्राइटेरिया वुड बी which job in which organization is the best for me to learn, because the learning is the most critical part in the early years of your job. If you draw the compensation curve और आप उसकी present value draw करोगे, तो you'll realize that it is heavily back-ended, which means that let's say the last 10 years of your career is when most of your lifetime's earnings are going to be made. So the earnings in the initial years of your life, while they may seem important to you at that point in time, like when we had graduated, I remember I was getting something like 3,250 rupees in HSBC, and Exxon gave me 8,000 rupees. And that seemed like a absolutely life-changing thing. But within 2 years, I realized it made no difference at all. Your compensation goes up so rapidly in the early parts of your career that it's not compensation, it is not the name of the company. It's whichever job and whichever company will allow you to grow the most and learn the most in the early stages of your career. That's what should be the single most important criteria for taking decisions.
Yes, and if we dissect this further, how do we evaluate from the outside? Yes, we can consult media, news reports, we can see projections, but how do we evaluate whether or not this company will allow us to have that growth potential that you're alluding to?
अच्छा, ये you're right. इसमें से those of us who are in Pakistan, and particularly जिस तरह IBA का था, तो I call it the IBA mafia. IBA mafia was everywhere. All the MNCs में भरे हुए थे IBA वाले. So you got inside information, first-hand information about the companies. I guess I can quote this story now. A class fellow of mine, a very good friend, Akhtar Mateen, went on to have a very successful career with Levers, Unilever. But at that time, he was working for Lipton, and Lipton had not yet been acquired by Levers. Lipton was an old-style British company, and one of first or second day on the job, he went back to his room. थोड़ी देर बाद the chaprasi comes in and says, "Saab, आपको बुला रहा है." So he goes back to the Saab, and his boss says, "Mr. Mateen, I think there is some confusion in your mind as to the role for which we have selected you in the company." He said, मैं confused हो गया, मेरा boss मुझे बोल रहा है, मैं confused. I said, why, sir? He said, I just saw you walking down the corridor and you were carrying a file in your hand. We have chaprasis for that, Mr. Mateen. Officers are not supposed to carry. So that told you a story like that, an anecdote like that will tell you this is a stuffy place. This is an old British, old boys network kind of a place. So for somebody like me, I'll stifle to death in an environment like that. So one way of doing it is obviously if you know people who are working there, that's the best source of information. But even then, there is a risk involved. You date a girl or a boy for 3 years and get married, and after you're married, you realize that actually the person is different from what you thought the person was. So a job is like that. So going in there and finding out. And what I've noticed the change to the new generation is in our generation, your aim was, the mindset was, you got into a top-notch MNC and then you stayed there for the rest of your career. The kids these days don't do that. In the first 5 years, they would have, especially the MBAs, they would have changed 3 to 4 jobs. So they get to experiment. They get to find out firsthand which place has is the right place for them and which one isn't.
Right. And right now in your answer, you alluded to reach out to the people working there, right? So I have studied in the US for my undergraduate, and I have friends that are studying in Pakistan. And during conversations, something that comes up is in the US, it's relatively a lot easier to reach out to people and have them converse with you because a lot of them are on LinkedIn already. A lot of them, but there's a culture here wherein, you reach out to people and they just sort of chat with you, coffee chats. Whereas in Pakistan, we see that a lot, एक तो Pakistan में issue already exists करता है कि आपका social silos हैं. If you're from a certain class, then access to certain intellectual capabilities is a lot easier for you as opposed to someone who's not from that social class. So पाकिस्तान के अंदर एक ये हमने बनाए हुए हैं social silos. उसके बाद we're not very responsive on LinkedIn, etc. either. So how does mentorship work? How do you reach out to these people, especially if you're not from that social segment? And do we have any platforms how do you reach out to students? How do students reach out to you?
Frankly, I'm not very well placed to answer this question of yours because I can't relate to this, right? This is your generation issue. This is not my generation issue. And as I said, in my generation also, my particular background, I'm from IBA, and wherever I was looking for a job or needed, apart from a job, you just needed information. I remember going in and I was doing my internship at Citibank during my MBA. तो मैं सिटी बैंक की इंटर्नशिप में मुझे कंज्यूमर केमिकल्स के ऊपर रिपोर्ट लिखनी थी. यूनिलीवर में वहां पे गया, and a girl who I did not know from Madam, but who was also an MBA from Lahore. And I said, "Yeah, I'm an MBA student, and look at this, and I need this information." कोई कंपनी देती नहीं है. She said, "हाँ हाँ हम भी जाते तो यही होता था." So you were able to relate from a similar network. So networking does make a difference. I'm not that sure about the US, but from whatever I have heard, the East Coast Ivy League network, even in the US, makes a difference. In UK, definitely the Eton Harrow crowd, the Cambridge, Oxford crowd, their networking is a big advantage to them. So that networking does make a difference in Pakistan also. But how do you overcome that hurdle? And especially जो नए अब social media platforms हैं, since I don't use them, I'm not really the best place to help or advise on that.
That is valid. And then I would like to move on more towards the corporate side. Now you're the CEO of Engro, that's the side I'm moving to. And in one of the interviews, you mentioned that you were working on a joint venture with 2 Fortune 500 companies. And over there, you encountered major losses in the first year due to an error in the feasibility report that you took responsibility for. And it was the reaction of Mr. Zafar Khan, who was the then CEO of Engro. And he sort of the leadership that he showed by not penalizing you for the mistake, but instead supporting you and guiding you through it and appreciating the way that you handled your response to having realized that mistake was what made all the difference. So then when you took a leadership role, what was your leadership style and what can we learn?
So बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हो. And if Zafar Khan had taken a different decision in that year of performance appraisal, a lot of things that I did later and which the company ended up doing later would not have happened. And that's what you learn from. I also learned tremendously from my mentor on the job, Shaukat Raza Mirza, who was the CEO who led the buyout of Exxon Chemical Pakistan operation, the first ever management-led buyout in Pakistan. And so it's a combination of kind of those two. You learn from your bosses. Shaukat Mirza was a great hands-on teacher. So the way I used to work, if those who were talented, the youngsters who were talented, who would be like 8 steps below me in the hierarchy, I would work directly with them. I would go and have sessions with them. Plus, the other thing that I used to do direct networking ke liye is that I always used to have lunch in the company cafeteria. Most of the senior people did not take out time for lunch breaks, and they would sit in office and have the sandwich or whatever, or completely skip lunch. I always used to do that. And since hardly any senior people were there, I always used to be sitting with junior lot. So you get to communicate directly. So a lot of the particularly not the technical part of it, but the cultural aspects of what it requires to be successful in that particular organization. That's how you impart. And technically, as I said, I'm a hands-on person. I would work directly with them, with the youngsters, and that frankly happened even as a federal minister. I used to work directly with the people who were at the working level. So that was my working style: getting engaged, working directly with them. And essentially, the principal leadership goal that I had in my mind was I knew the people who were working had awesome talent. Absolutely. And just let me give you a very quick anecdote on that. हम लोग गोल्डमन सैक्स को के साथ एक यूरोप इनफैक्ट जीडीआर इशू करने वाले थे, विच इज इक्विटी लिस्टिंग ऑफशोर। वो बाद में 2008-2009 का फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस हो गया, सारी दुनिया के बैंकिंग सिस्टम बैठ गए, तो वी डिड नॉट डू द ट्रांजैक्शन, बट फॉर दैट वी हैड टू गो एंड मेक प्रेजेंटेशंस इन सिंगापुर टू द क्रेडिट रेटिंग एजेंसीज मूडीज एंड S&P। एंड रात को मेरे पास फोन कॉल आया फ्रॉम वन बॉय, वन ऑफ द गाइज हु आई न्यू, हु इज अ पाकिस्तानी, हु वाज इन द गोल्डमन सैक्स टीम। And this was not just me, this was a group of us, 4 or 5 of us senior leaders who had gone to make those presentations. He said, you know what the other people in my Goldman Sachs team said? They said, we can definitely not find this quality of management in any Indian chemical company. And you'll struggle to find such quality management in even in the US. So that's the quality of team that I had with me. So all I had to do was force them to think big, force them to set high standards for themselves, and then just get out of the way and let them do their work. And what they achieved was just simply absolutely remarkable. I don't think there is a parallel to it in the corporate history of Pakistan, what was achieved in those 8 years.
Shout out to Arif Shahid, who exemplifies the similar principles. And thank you so much for that, because it's a very actionable strategy that I hope our audience will adopt. I myself definitely will. I would also like to focus in on the realization when it hit you that, you've made this mistake within the feasibility report. How did you as an individual feel within that moment? What were the thoughts that were racing through your, because this was a 5 billion rupees project, if I'm not wrong.
It was about $100 million.
$100 million, right. So $100 million, you've made a mistake, you're in continuous losses for the past 1 year, and you're in a relatively senior position. So what were the feelings within that moment?
Not a relatively senior position. I was the chief executive of the company.
Yeah.
I was made the CEO of that company at the age of 36. I had a Japanese executive vice president reporting to me, 20 years my senior. And the mistake was entirely our own. And it's very interesting. So what did I learn from that mistake? How did I feel? I felt like I owed the company and I owed the team, which had worked so hard and whose fault it was not. Mugi, तुमने क्या करना है? बाहर जाना है. And my Shih Tzu is trying to get my attention. Okay, so that it was, I owe these guys, and we need to fix this problem. Okay, बाहर जाना है. Yeah, you have to give this guy. Yes. Mugi बाहर जाएगा. I just back. I'll be just back. Oh, come. इधर जल्दी से भाग. Sorry. We have two Shih Tzus. The older one is a nice, mature personality. The younger one is a spoiled brat like me. So, okay. So it was that no matter what it takes, we have to make up for this mistake and we have to turn this into a success. So that's what the thought process was. I went through a very, very difficult time. I was wearing this brace, which was apparently stress driven. So I went through that. So that was the mind thought process. But what was the learning? Because that learning, and everybody will make different mistakes and there'll be different learnings, but that's why it's so important to learn from your mistakes. First of all, you have to acknowledge it's your mistake. If you don't acknowledge it's your mistake, you're never going to learn from it. And what I realized was that from that point onwards, whenever I was presented with information or supposed facts, which I liked, I made sure I was 10 times more critical in my questioning about those facts, as opposed to something which was not, because the normal human instinct is, it's validating your belief already. So when you see information, and that's what we had done, we had the right information in front of us, and we say, government of Pakistan का डेटा तो कभी भी ठीक नहीं होता, ये तो पूरा मित्सुबिशी और एंग्रो और असाई ग्लास ने तीनों ने मिलकर स्टडी की है, तो हमारा डेटा डेफिनेटली सही होगा. But the real reason why we were saying वो सही होगा, that was better for the project. That made the project look better. So we didn't question it the way we should have questioned it. So that was a big learning for me.
अच्छा sir, आखिरी सवाल from my side, and then we'll move on to the more technical सवालात. Sir, you've worked with obviously CEO of Engro, and then you're also the person dealing with the government for them, and then you eventually joined the government. You were working with such noble and notable individuals. Did imposter syndrome ever hit? And if it did, what were the strategies that you used to mitigate it?
नहीं पहले तो मुझे syndrome explain करो क्या what is
So,
that?
so imposter syndrome is basically where you start having doubts on yourself because you're surrounded by individuals around you that seemingly are more accomplished, and they don't necessarily have to even be more accomplished, just they're great. And sometimes you can also have it because of the scope of a project or because of the scope of what you're doing. Obviously, you're dealing with billions of dollars on one side, you're dealing with an entire country on the other. So did you have doubts, and how did you deal with those?
So yeah, not by the colleagues. वो तो I told you already कि मेरा जो बचपन था that makes you to use a slang word cocky, right? So you believe that you are as good as they come, and especially उसके बाद आपके corporate career के अंदर भी, and especially I'll tell you the biggest compliment of in an academic setting or in a corporate setting that I ever got was in the US. It was in Berkeley. I was doing my advanced management program there. And in the last, उसमें वहाँ पे as a part of that advanced management program, there was this business game also. You played that game, you made money, and etc. So our group, तीन लोगों का हमारा जो group था, we just blew the competition. We won that, etc. So it went up well. So the last day at the dinner, one of the guys who was working for Boeing at that time says to me, he says, "Hey, Asad, do you know you're smarter than a rocket scientist?" And I said, "Thank you." He said, "But you didn't ask me how do I know that you are smarter than a rocket scientist?" I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I am a rocket scientist myself. I used to work for NASA and now work for Boeing." So you have that belief in you that yes, you can do it. But do you start to have doubts? I can tell you two specific situations जहाँ पे I went through extreme stress and anxiety. One was dealing with the current account crisis that we had inherited. It was the worst. It still is the worst current account crisis Pakistan has ever seen. $2.1 billion a month on the average for 3 months in a row. That's when we walk into the combine. And I remember a meeting in which Dr. Hafiz Pasha, I have a tremendous respect for him, Stanford PhD, probably the most preeminent economist in Pakistan, the research work that he has done. So Hafiz Pasha says to Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, he says, मुझे नहीं पता ये असद रात को सोता कैसे है जैसे हालात हैं. And I said, ये आपने कैसे assume किया कि मैं रात को सोता हूँ? So that was a period of extreme where you have doubts. अच्छा वो भी है, अब आपने उस सिचुएशन से डील भी करना है, उस क्राइसिस से निकलना भी है, और कुकी कटर सोल्यूशन भी नहीं आप यूज कर सकते. Because Imran Khan has taken a position to about IMF program, so you can't just go. An easy thing to do is simply call an IMF, sign a deal, and that's the end of the problem for the time being. So that challenge, that situation, and the fact that you had to deal with it and out-of-box solutions, and the fact that we were able to come out of that crisis with literally without a ripple is, I think, one of the achievements of that government. And the second time was COVID. You're dealing with something which the whole world is having problem dealing with. You're seeing the hospitals in New York overflow. You're seeing hospitals in Mumbai and Delhi overflow. And that problem is now you're facing the same problem. And again, now you can't go with a cookie cutter solution, which everybody else is saying that you should go with, and just shut down the country. And Imran Khan calls me in. He said, "Asad, बस तूने मुल्क नहीं बंद करना. अब मुझे नहीं पता बाकी कैसे हैंडल करोगे, ये प्रॉब्लम तुम्हारा है, बट मुल्क नहीं बंद करना. ठीक है ना? Now you have to safeguard lives and safeguard livelihoods also." And we took decisions. We took decisions which were extremely controversial. We got lambasted within the country for taking those decisions. My closest friends were super critical of what I was doing. And initially, the numbers kind of showed that they were right. The criticism was correct. But we had faith in what we were doing. And then gradually things started to get better. But I'll tell you, सुबह के वक्त जब मैं उठता था, now you've taken these decisions. These are literally life and death decisions you have taken. And the first thing on the phone that I used to check was NCOC से मेरे पास एक दिन पहले के COVID statistics आए होते थे. And the first number I used to check was fatalities. And I remember the day we crossed 100 fatalities in a day, my literally energy drained out of my body. You feel responsible for it. So yes, those were two situations where you felt challenged, you were uncertain of doing the right thing. You thought you had worked everything out, you thought you had done all the homework, but until the results start coming in, you're not quite sure. So yeah, you do face those things.
And you just choose to address them head on and follow your gut instinct then.
Yeah. So no. That's a terrible thing to do. That's a terrible thing to do. That's what the Brazilian president, क्या नाम था उसका, Bolsonaro, something like that. That's what he did. That's what Donald Trump did. That's what Modi did. You don't just go with your gut feel, right? So when we chose to go there, we put in place an extremely rigorous data analytics, technology-based, artificial intelligence-based approach for what we were going to do. So there was a lot of method to that madness. It was not just a simple decision, "अच्छा नहीं बंद करेंगे." There were a host of other things that we had done. Use of technology like the government of Pakistan had never used before. And I guess that's the reason. I've said this earlier also कि पाकिस्तान की जब comparisons आते हैं, दुनिया की rankings आती हैं, ease of doing business की ranking होती है, corruption की ranking होती है, GDP growth की rankings होती हैं, जो भी ranking उठा के देख लो, Pakistan is somewhere between 110th and 150th in the world. It's just shameful जो हमारी सूरत हाल है इस वक्त. This was one thing the entire world was trying to deal with at the same time. Economist magazine, no friend of Pakistan, highly respected globally, did a quantified the response key effectiveness and did those rankings 3 times. The only country in the world which was in the top 3 every single time, every one of those 3 times was Pakistan. We were the only country in the world. We were number 3 once, we were number 2 once, and we were number 1 in the world once. So yeah, so no. Don't just go with your gut feel. Let the gut feel be your starting. Gut feel be nahi. The starting point was Imran Khan's belief कि मैंने अपने लोगों को, खास तौर पे जो गरीब लोगों को, मुश्किल से बचाना है. That's you start from that faith. That's the starting point. That was the foundation. That faith of IK कि मैंने अपने जो vulnerable हैं उनको मुश्किल से बचाना है. But then you don't just stop there. Then you put in the homework, you put in the effort, you use all the tools available of technology, of science, and take decisions on the basis of those.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that there was a lot of learning there for all of us. I certainly learned a lot. Over to Azaz for the technical side.
Thank you, Nabia. And again, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Sir, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us. We'll now transition to a set of pre-written questions that our members have put together for you, focusing on topics we believe are particularly relevant today. These include the federal budget, recent stock market trends, and more. Without further ado, let's begin with the first question. In light of the recent federal budget, debt servicing has become a hot topic of debate in Pakistan. Despite years of accumulating debt through extensive loan-based projects, some skeptics may downplay the issue for Pakistan by comparing it to countries like, say, the United States, which operates despite a staggering debt of over $31 trillion, which is higher in both absolute terms and as a debt to GDP ratio than Pakistan's. Can you explain how Pakistan's debt situation differs from that of other countries and why it might present more pressing challenges to manage?
Yeah, so पहली बात तो US के साथ तो comparison कोई किसी और दुनिया की country का किया ही नहीं जा सकता because it is the only country in the world which pays even the foreign lenders in its own currency. So डॉलर में पे करते हैं, डॉलर में बोरो करते हैं, डॉलर में पे करते हैं, तो ये तो लग्जरी किसी और कंट्री के पास नहीं है. बट इवन अदरवाइज जो है पाकिस्तान का जो प्रॉब्लम है वो स्टॉक ऑफ डेट से आपको नहीं समझ में आएगा। वो बिल्कुल सही कह रहे हैं कि अगर आप स्टॉक ऑफ डेट देखेंगे तो समवेयर इन दैट 75-80% ऑफ द जीडीपी की रेंज के अंदर आपको मिलेगा, और इससे बहुत सारी आपको कंट्रीज मिलेंगी जो इससे ज्यादा है। It is the serviceability of that debt, both the foreign debt and foreign debt की serviceability is determined by your current account situation, right? You have such a severe current account problem. Your reserves are such a low threshold that the servicing of that foreign debt is near impossible, and that is why you're constantly going back to the IMF programs. और IMF का भी जो प्रोग्राम होता है वो बेसिकली IMF के जो पुराने लोन्स हैं उनको वापस करने के लिए वो हमें नए लोन दे देते हैं। दैट्स वेयर वी आर राइट नाउ। सिमिलरली ऑन द डोमेस्टिक साइड हमारा डेट जो है, because of running very very high fiscal deficits for a very long period of time, sustained period of time, our debt has reached a point now where we are borrowing new money to pay for even interest, not just to return the debt, but even for interest servicing, we are having to pay. More than 50% of the revenue of the country is going in debt servicing. In my humble opinion, and in the opinion of many other people, it is simply not sustainable any longer. Pakistan ki debt reprofiling has to be done both external and domestic. It's a very controversial thing that I'm saying. There would be a lot of people who would be saying कि ये बड़ी irresponsible बात की है, but that is the reality, and the earlier we face that reality, the better it is. If you do it in a structured manner, सिर्फ प्रॉब्लम क्या है कि the question would be कि अच्छा अगर ये situation है तो करते क्यों नहीं है? Because the kind of reforms that you will have to carry out, now nobody is going to let you reprofile your debt without carrying out very deep reform, much more, much harsher than the reforms that you're carrying out right now. Because अभी जो reform हो रही है, this is survival के लिए reform हो रही है. So already it is so harsh कि उसकी political cost जो है वो देना मुश्किल हो रही है. अगर आप reprofiling की तरफ जाएंगे, which in my opinion there is no choice, you will have to go to reprofiling. If you don't do that, you will have, at some point in time, we came very very close to it. अभी से साल डेढ़ साल पहले, a unstructured default on your debt, and the consequences of those will be far more horrific than the cost of the reforms that have to be carried out. So it's absolutely urgent, it is vital, and Pakistan must get on with it.
Okay, I had a follow-up for this question, but I'd change it up a little bit. When we talk about restructuring our debt, the federal budget just came out. अगर ये वक्त नहीं था restructure करने का, तो क्या वक्त होगा जब when will it be the right time to restructure your debt?
देखो, इसमें the only thing that I can say is a question of time, right? ये elections हुए हैं February 8th को, government form हुई है end of February, the finance minister came into the job in March, so he had less than 3 months to prepare this budget. So इस budget से पहले to be able to carry out, because जो debt reprofiling होगी ना, वो एक बड़ा complex lengthy process है, उसके अंदर international lenders involved हैं, bilateral lenders हैं, multilateral lenders हैं, and private sector institutions हैं. So that's a very complex thing. But now, having gotten the budget out of the way, my advice to the finance minister would be, this is the time to do it. Do it in the early years of, this is the first year of this government. वो पता नहीं, ये एक और issue है कि वो government की जो है क्या legitimacy जो है वो under serious cloud है, पता नहीं कितनी देर चलेगी कि नहीं चलेगी. But if they are going to be planning to stay around, then they should deal with it right now.
Okay. Our next question is regarding the Pakistani Stock Exchange and its recent and somewhat unexpected positive performance. For those who may not be familiar, just over a week ago, the stock exchange climbed to an all-time high of 78,000 and something, and the KSC 100 index, which is an index of Pakistan's top 100 companies, was recognized as Asia's best performing market. While a booming stock market typically signifies a favorable environment for investors and indicates strong purchasing power in the public, there is discontent on whether to interpret this as a positive indicator in the context of Pakistan's economic situation. Skeptics point to apparent economic instability and an elite-captured market. What is your take on all of this? Is the stock market really an unreliable indicator of economic growth? Or does this discontent stem from a lack of understanding of a stock market among Pakistanis?
Yeah. पहले तो slight correction. Last 12 months में Pakistan Stock Exchange was not the best performing stock exchange in Asia. It was the best performing stock exchange in the world. 94% dollar return. But you have to understand that, so context देखना पड़ेगा आपको, और context ये है कि आपसे आज से कोई 1.5 साल पहले आप डिफॉल्ट फेस कर रहे थे। आपके जो यील्ड्स आपके बॉन्ड्स के ऊपर थी वो 60% से ऊपर, नॉर्थ ऑफ 60% पे पहुंच गई। सो यू वर एट अ सिचुएशन जहां बहुत स्टीप डिस्काउंट हो रहा था आपके फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज का। सिमिलरली इंटरेस्ट रेट्स वर एट एन ऑल टाइम हाई, द पॉलिसी रेट वाज एट 22%. So your industrial growth rate was negative. Every indicator was in shambles. So in the last 12 months, once the IMF program was signed up, तो आपका risk of default went away. So आपके जो yields on your bonds also came down significantly. Because basically share की price कैसे determine होती है? It's the future cash flows discounted by the appropriate discount rate or the interest rate or the required rate of return. And so the required rate of return substantially came down once the risk of default went away. That was the single biggest thing. Now, uske baad anticipation thi, your prices are also forward looking, right? So you could see inflation was coming down. Inflation had peaked at about 37%, 37, 38% आज से साल 1.5 साल पहले, and it is down to about 12% right now. अभी जून के numbers आएंगे, शायद थोड़ा सा kick होगा, 13% के ऊपर होगा, but it's like 1/3 of where it was 1.5 साल. And as a result, interest rates were expected to come down, and they started to come down. There was a 150 bips cut discount rate cut. अभी जो last monetary policy meeting हुई थी. So looking at all this, the fundamentals support a very strong performance of the stock market, but that doesn't mean that on an absolute level the economy is in great shape, and that can be seen by the pricing of the shares even today. The price of the share, it's not the absolute price which is meaningful. 78,000 by itself doesn't mean anything. How highly the shares are priced is a function of what the price is relative to what the earnings are, which is called the price earnings ratio. The P ratio of Pakistan traditionally used to be in the range of 8 to 10. The P multiple used to be about 8 to 10. The P multiple, after this record-breaking performance of the last 1 year, the P multiple is still only 4.5. So it's still at an absolute level, it's still a not very highly priced stock market because the economy is not in great shape. It's not in as bad a shape as it was a year back, but it's not in great shape. And therefore, the valuations are still not great. They're much better than what they were last year, but they're still not great valuations.
All right. I didn't have a follow-up question for this, but I did want to bring your attention to the possibility of an elite captured market as well, which I also wanted to follow up. Okay, is there a possibility of learning about the stock market among the youth maybe? Okay, even when you're studying outside, it's mostly self-learning. But what is, your view of the situation right now? Okay, kitni knowledgeability hai about what these sort of things are, but also the elite captured market, if you could please.
Yeah. So stock market jo hai, it's obviously not a perfectly functioning market. There is significant advantage to insiders. That is a fact. But it's significantly better than when I first started investing in the stock market in the early 90s. The liquidity of the market has gone up substantially, and the ability of a few people to move the market is diminished. I wouldn't say it has gone away, but it is diminished significantly compared to where it was earlier days. So of all the asset classes in Pakistan, it's still the one which has the most transparency, the greatest liquidity, and price discovery in this market is better than any other asset class in Pakistan. So it's not perfect, but it's better than other asset classes in Pakistan.
And what sort of resources should one look at to find all these figures?
You mean in terms of investing?
Not in terms of investing. I mean, maybe if someone wants to invest, but say, for example, someone just wants to learn more about it, or, where are these sort of findings published, or if they are published at all?
So the stock market data is available online. The PSX has got actually a good website. So live actual prices are being displayed, volumes of trade are being displayed, history is available there online. So go to the PSX website and you'll find a lot of data in there.
Our next question deals with continuity in policy making and changing governments. In our latest example of discontinuity, last week the National Assembly passed the new federal budget, introducing a series of development projects for the next few years. Consequently, previous initiatives laid out by former governments largely conclude unfinished. In your opinion, is continuity an essential aspect of successful policymaking? If so, how can Pakistan's parliament create a sense of continuity in their policies, even amid changing governments?
Okay, so to me, this is at the heart of Pakistan's problems. This lack of continuity and this uncertainty is at the very heart of Pakistan's problem. I've written about this. I've written an article about this also. I've done podcasts also. From 1958 to 1988, Pakistan's GDP growth rate averaged 6.1% a year. And from 88 to 2018, it had come down to just about 4%. And if I take it all the way to 2024, so probably the number will be even lower than that. And the biggest difference is that from in the 58 to 88 time frame, there was certainty of governance. You had your system had clarity. Who was in charge? And the fact that they were going to be in charge for a lengthy period of time. From 88 onwards, you have had this constant change of governments, and the governments have changed every 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Uh, but the rumors about the change of government start literally 3 months after the government is formed. And the same thing is happening right now. This government right now already, I look at what comments I made a bit earlier. I'm not even sure how long this government will last. So this uncertainty has had a damning effect on Pakistan's economic prospects. हो क्या रहा है? Why is Pakistan going back again and again and again into these IMF programs? जो भी गवर्नमेंट आती है, it is focused on survival, on political survival. So जब वो political survival के ऊपर focus कर रहा है, तो उसने क्या खाक long term planning करनी है? They all concentrate on economic decisions which will allow them to survive with the least amount of political cost in the short run. So, and as a result, सारी इकोनॉमिक डिसीजन मेकिंग हैज बीन लेफ्ट टू फॉलोइंग द आईएमएफ प्रोग्राम. अच्छा भला पढ़ा लिखा एक एंकर जो बड़ा इकोनॉमी फॉलो करता है, वो मुझसे मैंने को कहा कि हमें इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ स्ट्रेटजी बनाने की जरूरत है. उसने कहा जी वो तो क्या, तो आईएमएफ प्रोग्राम में तो हमारी ग्रोथ स्ट्रेटजी क्या जरूरत है, वो तो आगे ना आईएमएफ का. So IMF is only telling you how to survive. It is a recipe for how to come out of a macroeconomic crisis. IMF programs are not designed to give you long-term sustainable growth. And long-term sustainable growth ke liye, and we can talk about that, what needs to be done for that. But that requires a long-term perspective of the decision maker. जब decision maker को यही नहीं पता कि मैं 6 महीने के बाद यहाँ पे होऊंगा या नहीं होऊंगा, तो किसी को भी, मैं आपको वहां पे एजाज को बिठा दूं वहां पे, और एजाज को ये ना पता हो कि 4 महीने बाद गवर्नमेंट होगी ही नहीं होगी, तो व्हाट इज द लाइक्लीहुड के एजाज कहेगा कि यार ऐसा करते हैं. ये हार्वर्ड की ग्रोथ लैब जो है ना, रिकार्डो हाउसमैन ने उसमें बड़ा जबरदस्त काम किया हुआ है, कम्प्लेक्सिटी इंडेक्स वाला. तो हमें लॉन्ग टर्म इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी बनानी चाहिए यूजिंग द कम्प्लेक्सिटी इंडेक्स. So whoever has made this comment has hit the nail on the head. That is at the heart of our economic problems.
Oh, that was a question our team made, so thank you. I mean, my follow-up to that would be, is there any chance for cooperation between political parties now or in the future, maybe more so in the future?
देखो, पाकिस्तान की जो इकोनॉमिक प्रॉब्लम्स हैं ना, दे आर रूटेड इन पाकिस्तान's politics and its governance systems. सो जब तक आपका गवर्नेंस सिस्टम और पॉलिटिक्स स्टेबलाइज नहीं होगी, आपकी इकोनॉमिक डिसीजन मेकिंग स्टेबलाइज नहीं हो सकती. ये नहीं पॉसिबल है कि पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज आर एट ईच अदर्स थ्रोट. आई यूज दिस कोट वेरी ऑफन फ्रॉम ए जेंटलमैन, पता नहीं तुमने उसका नाम सुना होगा कि नहीं, बाय द नेम ऑफ राना सनाउल्ला. Rana Sanaullah is a former minister of the PMLN government, and he said a year and a half back, he said about us or PTI, he said के अब तो हमारी इनके साथ सियासी मुखालफत नहीं है, अब हमारी दुश्मनी है. अब या हम रहेंगे या ये रहेंगे. So with politics polarized, and I'm not singling out PMLN by the way for this, I'm not making a partisan comment. Pakistan's politics is so deeply politicized, it is so fractious that इसके अंदर ये पॉसिबल नहीं है कि गवर्नमेंट में हम ये तो डिसाइड कर रहे हो कि अब हम गवर्नमेंट में आ गए तो किस किस को, ऑपोजिशन वाले को पकड़ के हमें जेल में डलवाना है, लेकिन इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी के ऊपर हम जो है ना बड़ी सेंसिबल एग्रीमेंट कर लेंगे. इट ain't gonna happen. So you have to solve the governance riddle of Pakistan and the political riddle of Pakistan before you can have economic stability and long-term decision making.
Okay. For our next question, you've already touched upon
Sorry,
some of this.
just the last comment on that.
Yeah.
Like अभी की सिचुएशन देखो ना, वो शहबाज शरीफ ने कह दिया जी हमें चार्टर ऑफ इकोनॉमी के ऊपर बात करनी चाहिए. इमरान खान जेल में पड़ा हुआ है. पीटीआई बात करेगी चार्टर ऑफ इकोनॉमी के ऊपर with Imran Khan sitting in jail. So you see the linkage between the two. So this concept of इकोनॉमिक फंडामेंटल्स के ऊपर हमारा एग्रीमेंट हो जाए, ये हो ही नहीं सकता जब तक पॉलिटिकल फंडामेंटल्स के ऊपर एग्रीमेंट ना हो.
So, if there was to be a change, would it be a step-by-step long-term process, or would it be if you were to predict, would it be a one event?
देखो, इसके अंदर जो फंडामेंटल चेंज है ना, वो तो मेरे ख्याल में एक वन स्टेप प्रोसेस होगा. ईदर द स्टेक होल्डर्स ऑफ पाकिस्तान के जो सिस्टम के जो एलीट ऑफ पाकिस्तान है, जो पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज हैं, जो ब्यूरोक्रेसी है, जो मिलिट्री है, जो जुडिशरी है, ईदर दे विल कम टू द कंक्लूजन that not only is Pakistan's current system broken, which I'm pretty sure that all of them do understand that it's broken, but that our interest, either as persons or as a class, our elite interest is now threatened, right? Britain के अंदर उन्होंने आज तक gradually democracy इसलिए नहीं लेकर आए थे because the nobility or the king had become a very wise human beings and they wanted insaf and equality in society. They realized that if we keep resisting this change, तो वो होगा जो ultimately Russian Tsar के साथ हुआ and he had his head chopped off, या वो French king के साथ हुआ, right? So either the elite of Pakistan will come to the conclusion that if we keep resisting change, then we are going to have our, figuratively speaking, our heads chopped off and we will be losers, or we start to make concessions and start to come up and compromise and put together a system in place which is workable. That system itself will not deliver revolutionary results. वो ऐसा नहीं होगा कि वो system जिस दिन आएगा तो अगले दिन पाकिस्तान जो है वो बहुत जबरदस्त हो जाएगा. Then it will be a gradual step-by-step process done over at least a generation before you can start seeing significant change.
All right. This last question is a bit of a 180, but finally, it has been speculated that during your tenure as finance minister in 2019, you ran into disagreements with the IMF over certain loan conditions. Could you please elaborate on the nature of these disagreements and why they were challenging to resolve?
अच्छा, जो IMF के साथ हमारी पहली जो बात हुई ना, जो एक तो पहले मैं क्लियर कर दूं कि जो कहते हैं ना कि जी हमने देर किया IMF के पास आने के, मुझे एक हफ्ता हुआ था फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर बने हुए, एंड आई पिक्ड अप द फोन एंड कॉल्ड मिस्टर जिहाद अजूर, हु वाज आवर रीजन का IMF का हेड. ही इज अ फॉर्मर फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर ऑफ लेबनान, वेरी नाइस गाय. जिहाद से मैंने बोला यार कि हम अभी स्टडी कर रहे हैं whether we want to go into an IMF program or not, but I quoted a clause in the IMF constitution which allowed a member country to ask for technical help in evaluation. मैं कहा तो मुझे टीम भेज सकते हो, in the meantime who can come and do an assessment for us, and I want to have their views in front of us also in taking that decision. He said no problem. 3 हफ्ते के बाद वो टीम IMF की पाकिस्तान बैठी थी. They did their initial assessment, उन्हें भेज दिया. मेरी पीएम से बात हो गई, पीएम ने कहा कि ठीक है गो अहेड कर दे दो, उनको बुला लो. हमने उनको बुला लिया. आई कॉट द प्लेन, वेंट टू बाली. वहां पे IMF वर्ल्ड बैंक की मीटिंग हो रही थी. आई मेट द IMF मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर क्रिस्टीन लगार्ड. वहां पे मीटिंग हुई, एग्रीमेंट हो गया, टीम आ गई उनकी वहां पे. जब वो आके बैठे तो प्रॉब्लम ये हुआ कि हमारी फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री की टेक्निकल कैपेबिलिटी एक्सट्रीमली वीक है, एक्सट्रीमली वीक. स्टेट बैंक हैज अ मच बेटर टेक्निकल कैपेबिलिटी, सो आई वाज रिलाइंग ऑन स्टेट बैंक के ऊपर ज्यादा. हम अपनी मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक मॉडलिंग कर रहे थे. वो भी पाकिस्तान में किस तरीके से काम शुरू होता है. एक वन सीनियर मैन इन द रूम, आई रिमेंबर, फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री का, ही सेज टू मी, ही सेज सर ये आप रोज 6 वेरिएबल दे देते हैं कि 10 वेरिएबल दे देते हैं, उनसे बोलते हैं मॉडल रन करके आओ, वो सारी रात काम करते हैं, फिर अगले दिन आप बैठ के 2 घंटे इसको देखते हैं. आप बताएं आपको एंड रिजल्ट क्या चाहिए, हम आपको दे देंगे मॉडल से निकाल के एंड रिजल्ट. सो मैंने कहा भाई मुझे ये नहीं चाहिए. सो व्हाट वाज हैपनिंग वाज कि IMF का मॉडल वाज predicting different results based on the policy measures that we were proposing than the state bank model was doing. State bank model was saying that this will have a greater impact. IMF model was saying it will have less of an impact. And उसके ऊपर as a result, consequential क्या था? They had said 184 rupees का डॉलर कर दें आप, जो उस वक्त 140 के लगभग का था. And by the way, जब IMF program हुआ, anyway, I'll come back to the dollar later, but 184 is what they were asking for from 140. They wanted about a 90% increase in the gas price, a 50% increase in the electricity price, etc., etc. And a lot of it was driven by the devaluation because energy prices are dollar denominated, or at least the energy fuel cost is dollar denominated, so it has a direct knock-on impact on the end prices also. So हमारी उनसे डिस्कशन हुई, एंड आई एम नाउ सेइंग दिस पब्लिकली फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम. आईएमएफ का जो डेलीगेशन आया हुआ था, उस डेलीगेशन में से, आई विल नॉट नेम द गाय बिकॉज दैट माइट गेट him into trouble. I think he's retired now, but I still don't want to. He asked for meeting me separately, separate from the leader. And he told me कि यार ये जो तुम्हें कह रहा है करने को, ये ठीक नहीं है. ये आईएमएफ की टीम का अपना बंदा मुझे कह रहा है. मैं आई डोंट वांट टू डिस्क्लोज हिज नेम. The leader at that time was a gentleman from Germany. उसने कहा ये जर्मन है, ये पागल, ये फिस्कल ऑस्टेरिटी में पागल होते हैं. उन्होंने ग्रीस का भी इसलिए सत्यानाश किया था. By the way, if you have not read that book, if you are interested in the subject, Varoufakis, Yanis Varoufakis, I think is his name. I could be wrong about the name.
I'll
He was
take
a
a
Greek
look.
man. And the weak suffer what they must. It's a must-read book on dealing with Germany and what the German youth. Anyway, so I don't want to say anything against Germany as a country, but it's just a mindset. उनका background है, hyperinflation उन्होंने face की हुई है. They are very very austere in their fiscal measure. So हमने ये डिसाइड किया उस वक्त. आई वेंट एंड शोड इट टू आईके. ऐसे यार मैंने तो नहीं कहा हुआ, आपने कहा हुआ है पाकिस्तान के सामने खड़े होकर मैं खुदकुशी करूंगा, मैं प्रोग्राम नहीं करूंगा. दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव टू डू. आई कैन साइन दिस, मेरा प्रॉब्लम खत्म. बट दैट मीन्स के मेरे ख्याल में इमरान खान की हम पॉलिटिक्स की 22 साल की स्ट्रगल का डेथ नेल साइन कर रहे हैं. So we have to raise cash flow in the meantime so that हमें प्रेशर ना बिल्ड हो. We went out, आईके की क्रेडिबिलिटी की बेसिस के ऊपर हमें यूएई से, चाइना से, सऊदी अरेबिया से कैश मिला. आवर रिजर्व्स वर स्टेबल, हमारी मार्केट स्टेबल रही, बॉन्ड मार्केट स्टेबल रही. हमारी इंटरनेशनल बॉन्ड्स जो हैं उनकी यील्ड्स जाके देख लो, दे बेयरली बज्ड, they were stable, so there was no panic, no risk. इस पीरियड के अंदर जहां हमने खत्म किया था, because that IMF guys were professional guys, they said यार 2-3 महीने का ब्रेक लेते हैं और ऐसे करते हैं कि अगर तुम्हारे मेजर से तुम रिजल्ट्स जो तुम समझ रहे हो आ रहे होंगे तो हम तुम्हारी बात मान जाएंगे, और अगर नहीं आ रहे होंगे तो तुम हमारी बात मान जाओगे. I said fair enough. And when we started the discussions again 3 months later, IMF guys agreed that yes, that your model was better predictive of what was happening. So we made the changes. Sorry, the second part of it that we were doing, we were not just waiting कि IMF के साथ साइन नहीं करें. हम constantly अपने decisions लेते जा रहे थे. हमने गैस प्राइस भी चेंजेस की, हमने बिजली की प्राइस भी चेंज की, हमने रुपए को भी एडजस्टमेंट अलाउ किया, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. बट फिर जाके अप्रैल में मैं गया वाशिंगटन डीसी. अप्रैल के अंदर डेप्यूटी मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर डेविड लिप्टन के साथ मेरी मीटिंग हुई. आखिरी चीज उस वक्त तक आउटस्टैंडिंग थी, रुपी फ्री फ्लोट होगा या रुपी जो है वो मार्केट बेस्ड फ्लेक्सिबल एक्सचेंज रेट होगा. We told him why we did not believe that free float was the right thing to go, that the market based exchange rate was the right thing to do. मुझे बहुत लोगों ने डराया था, डेविड लिप्टन बड़ा सख्त आदमी है, बड़ी बदतमीजी कर देता है, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. I said यार सुन लेंगे. अगर I explained it to him, मेरे ख्याल में 10 या 15 मिनट के अंदर we had an agreement. He said okay fine, and that was done, and we had an agreement, and I came back to Pakistan after that. So that was where the difference of opinion with IMF था, and we were able to reach a closure in the end.
Thank you so much, sir. Before I transition on to the second segment of our session today, I'd like to give you a moment to maybe take a break and get some
Yes,
relief.
please. Yes, please. Yes.
Session
Yeah, I'll be back in less than a minute.
Great, thank you.
Okay, where were we?
Thank you so much, sir, Azaz and Nabiha, for that exceptionally enlightening discussion. Sir, your insights were truly invaluable and shed light upon a wide range of issues that we will now explore further in the second segment of today's session. I will now hand over to Rai Hassan, Director of Outreach and Partnerships, and Lina Hussain, Director of Operations at the PSA Coalition, to initiate our audience Q&A. Rai and Lina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Myra. Sir, आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया for joining us and for sharing such powerful anecdotes. और I think पहली दफ़ा किसी ने जो पाकिस्तान की मुशीयत है उसे इतनी आसानी से digestible तरीके से मेरे सामने रखा है. Thank you for that. And definitely there's a lot to
Most
learn from
welcome,
you.
and I love that T-shirt at the back.
सर मायूस हैं जब से हारे हैं लेकिन उम्मीद पे दुनिया कायम है. Sir, I'm pretty sure there's a lot to learn from you and your experiences. Lekin at the same time, there's some very interesting questions from some very talented students across Pakistan and US. Sir, Rehan Asgar, a student at UNC Charlotte, पूछते हैं कि what was the biggest challenge that you faced when you joined the office as Minister of Finance and how you were able to resolve?
अच्छा, एक्चुअली इसका जवाब मैं पहले वो तफसील से दे चुका हूँ. द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज वाज द करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट दैट वी वर फेसिंग. वी हैड रिजर्व्स व्हिच वर बेसिकली डाउन टू नथिंग, and we were running a deficit of more than $2 billion a month. So उधर से निकलना भी था और इमीडिएटली आईएमएफ के पास जाके जो भी आईएमएफ मांग रहा था उस पे एग्री भी नहीं करना था, उनकी टर्म्स भी जो है वो सॉफ्टन करानी थी. सो दैट वाज द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज, बट आई हैव एक्सप्लेन्ड इन ग्रेट डिटेल ऑफ हाउ वी डिड दैट.
Valid, sir, valid. Sir, Mohammad Waqas Fayaz from Drexel asks, how can we bring our education system at par with the world and how to improve the economic outlook of Pakistan?
अच्छा, ये दो बिल्कुल डाइवर्स बहुत बड़े क्वेश्चन है. पहली बात तो एजुकेशन सिस्टम का, तो आई एम नॉट रियली एन एक्सपर्ट इन द एजुकेशन सिस्टम, बट क्लियरली दिस इज समथिंग दैट पाकिस्तान नीड्स टू put in a lot more focus and resources on. So that's really all that I can say, because आप जो दूसरा पार्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चन है उसका मैं ब्रीफली अगर जवाब दूं, मैं बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग बिलीवर हूँ. मैंने ऑलरेडी पहले मेंशन भी किया था, रेफर किया था रिकार्डो हॉसमैन को, और complexity economics and the role that knowledge plays in sustainable economic development, and how the more knowledge that you have in a society, not as an individual but as a society, the more knowledge that you have, the more sustainable your economic growth, the higher your income levels. In fact, अगर आप प्लॉट करके देखें इकोनॉमिक कम्प्लेक्सिटी इंडेक्स को प्लॉट करें against GDP, तो you'll see a very strong correlation there. I think the R square is something like 0.73. So knowledge, वो जो एजुकेशन सिस्टम है उसकी इम्प्रूवमेंट, एजुकेशन सिस्टम की इम्प्रूवमेंट एट ऑल लेवल्स. हाँ, ये सिर्फ वो नहीं है कि हमने साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी बहुत एडवांस लेवल पे आईटी पढ़ानी है, वो भी इंपॉर्टेंट है, बट प्राइमरी स्कूल के अंदर जो आप एजुकेशन दे रहे हैं, जो बेसिक एजुकेशन आप दे रहे हैं, दैट इज डायरेक्टली इम्पैक्टिंग द प्रोडक्टिविटी ऑफ योर वर्कर्स इन एग्रीकल्चर, इन इंडस्ट्री, इन द सर्विस इंडस्ट्री. सो एजुकेशन एट ऑल लेवल इज की टू दिस. सो आपने जो हमारी इकोनॉमिक जो ग्रोथ का प्रॉब्लम रहा है, इफ यू लुक एट दैट कम्प्लेक्सिटी इंडेक्स ऑफ पाकिस्तान की इंडस्ट्री का स्ट्रक्चर देखो पिछले तुम 30 साल के अंदर, एंड यू बेयरली सी अ चेंज इन द स्ट्रक्चर. जो पाकिस्तान बनाता था ऑलमोस्ट वही चीजें पाकिस्तान आज भी बना रहा है. सो पाकिस्तान इज नॉट प्रोड्यूसिंग व्हाट द मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड डिमांड्स एंड व्हाट इट नीड्स. Why is that important for Pakistan? Pakistan is a $300 billion economy, give or take, right? लगभग $300-350 billion की इकोनॉमी है. दुनिया जो है वो लगभग $100 ट्रिलियन की इकोनॉमी है, यानी दुनिया जो है वो पाकिस्तान से 300 गुना से ज्यादा बड़ी है, राइट? सो आप की जो ग्रोथ आएगी वो आएगी उस बड़े समुंदर के अंदर सक्सेसफुली स्विम करने से, विच इज द ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी, एंड नॉट इन द स्मॉल पॉन्ड विच इज द पाकिस्तानी इकोनॉमी, राइट? But if you want to participate in the global economy, you have to produce goods and services which the world needs. कितनी जुराबें आप दुनिया को बेचेंगे, कितनी बनियानें आप दुनिया को बेचेंगे? अनफॉर्चुनेटली दैट्स ऑल यू आर डूइंग. मैं पहले भी एग्जांपल दे चुका हूं कि हम चाइना जा रहे हैं, शी जिनपिंग के साथ मीटिंग हो रही है इमरान खान की, हम बड़ी तैयारी करके जा रहे हैं, बहुत हमें जबरदस्त ट्रीटमेंट दे रहे हैं, ओपन ऑफर आ रही है, आगे से शी जिनपिंग बोल रहे हैं जी बताओ तुम्हें क्या चाहिए, पाकिस्तान क्या मदद चाहिए हमसे. और हम जो है वो हमारी पुरानी लाइन, हमने कहा जी हम तो ट्रेड चाहिए, हमें वो तो नहीं चाहिए हमें, एड नहीं चाहिए, हमें ट्रेड चाहिए। उन्होंने कहा बहुत अच्छी बात है, अच्छा बताओ भाई ट्रेड। उन्होंने कहा जी हम रजाक दाऊद साहब जो है ना, ये कॉमर्स मिनिस्टर हमारे साथ हैं, ये कल इनकी मीटिंग होगी और ये बताएंगे हम आपको क्या दे सकते हैं। तो अगले दिन जब रजाक दाऊद वहां पे बैठे, एंड रजाक दाऊद इज बाय द वे educated from the best financial institutions of educational institutions of the world, is a world class resource, is a world class businessman. So ये नहीं कि रजाक दाऊद में कोई कमजोरी थी, but what did Razak Daud have to offer to the Chinese? उनके यार हमारे से चावल ले लो और हमारे से चीनी ले लो, that's all we had to offer. Do you know कि चाइना जो है, मैं if I, थोड़ा सा मैं elaborate कर दूं इस पॉइंट को, because this is important था. सो लेट्स टेक, मैंने एक प्रेजेंटेशन की थी, ये जिसकी मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ना, कम्प्लेक्सिटी इंक्रीज करने की इकोनॉमी के अंदर, नॉलेज बेस्ड इकोनॉमी के अंदर, नॉट नॉलेज बेस्ड एज एन आईटी सेक्टर बट नॉलेज इन द ब्रॉडर सेंस, किस तरीके से माइग्रेट करना है, हाउ यू मेक इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी ऑन द बेसिस दैट 22 फरवरी 2022 को, 22 फरवरी 2022 को मैंने प्राइम मिनिस्टर को फॉर्मल प्रेजेंटेशन करके अप्रूवल ली थी कि दिस इज व्हाट वी डूइंग। वो पूरी प्रेजेंटेशन है, हमारे पास टाइम नहीं है, अदरवाइज आई कुड पुट इट अप एंड शोड यू व्हाट दैट प्रेजेंटेशन वाज। एंड हमने उसके अंदर अप्रूवल लेने के 6 और 8 14 डेज लेटर वोट ऑफ नो कॉन्फिडेंस हमारे खिलाफ आ चुका था और हमारी हुकूमत फारिग हो चुकी थी। बट इन दैट प्रेजेंटेशन वी सेड कि यार हमारी बड़ी स्पेशल रिलेशनशिप है चाइना के साथ, राइट, एंड चाइना इज वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट इकोनॉमीज ऑफ द वर्ल्ड। चाइना टोटल तो 2 ट्रिलियन से डॉलर से ज्यादा की इंपोर्ट करता है, बट हमने कहा कि उसको नॉन ओईसीडी जो इंपोर्ट्स हैं चाइना की, यानी जो सबसे एडवांस कंट्री से वो इंपोर्ट करता है, वो पाकिस्तान इसको तो नहीं बना सकता, समझ में आने वाली बात है, उनको हम एक्सक्लूड कर देते हैं। और एनर्जी प्रोडक्ट्स को हम एक्सक्लूड कर देते हैं, तेल गैस पाकिस्तान नहीं है एक्सपोर्ट करने के लिए, हम इसको भी एक्सक्लूड कर देते हैं। इन दोनों को एक्सक्लूड करने के बाद चाइना की total imports, non-ECD, non-energy based, were $850 billion in that year. $850 billion. उसमें से just the top 10 products were $450 billion, which means that top 100 would be about $600 billion, right? उन टॉप 100 इंपोर्ट्स ऑफ चाइना में से पाकिस्तान क्या एक्सपोर्ट करता है? नॉट ए सिंगल आइटम, नॉट वन थिंग। तो आपकी जितनी भी आपको ट्रेड एक्सेस मिल जाए चाइना को, उसके अंदर भी हेड शोड कि देयर आर 176 लाइन आइटम्स इन द फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट विद चाइना। बहुत लोगों को एतराज है जी हमारा फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट अच्छा नहीं है, बट प्रॉब्लम फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट का नहीं है। 176 लाइन आइटम्स इन द फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट जो जीरो ड्यूटी पे हम चाइना एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, वी आर एक्सपोर्टिंग जीरो बिकॉज हम प्रोड्यूसिंग करते हैं। सो देयरफॉर यू नीड एन इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी। पूरा ईस्ट एशिया ऐसे डेवलप हुआ, द एंटायर ईस्ट एशिया। और ये बहुत एक जमाने के अंदर ये आईएमएफ और वो वाशिंगटन कंसेंसस वाले इसके खिलाफ बातें करते थे इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी के। आज देखो अमेरिका की, यू गाइस आर सिटिंग इन अमेरिका, इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन एक्ट देखा है आपने, जो अमेरिका का जो बाइडेन जो लेके आया था, वो इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन एक्ट क्या है? वो उसका इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन से ताल्लुक कोई नहीं है। इन्फ्लेशन रिडक्शन एक्ट इज इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी। वो कह रहे हैं कि 21st सेंचुरी में अगर मैंने compete करना है तो सोलर ये जो पावर की इंडस्ट्री है, और ग्रीन इंडस्ट्री इन ग्रीन टेक्नोलॉजीज इन जनरल, जो सेमीकंडक्टर और ये सारी जो आईटी बेस्ड इंडस्ट्रीज हैं, दीज आर क्रिटिकल फॉर माय फ्यूचर कंपेटिटिवनेस। तो मैं सब्सिडाइज लोन्स भी दूंगा, मैं प्रोटेक्टिव ड्यूटीज भी लगाऊंगा। दिस इज व्हाट इंडस्ट्रियल पॉलिसी इज। एक्सेप्ट कि वहां पर वो डायनेमिक होती है, और पाकिस्तान के अंदर जो है हम उसी चीज को सब्सिडाइज कर रहे हैं जिसको 1965 में सब्सिडाइज करते थे। वो वैल्यूडेशन एंड इंप्रूवमेंट। जरा लंबा जवाब हो गया, but it's important that that's what Pakistan needs to do. It needs to have continuity of policy, and in that continuity of policy, we need to have a robust, data-based, analytic-based industrial policy, which will take Pakistan to a growth path, which almost all of Asia has now seen.
Assalamu alaikum, sir, and everyone else. I'll take a question from the chat for this one. Azim Sajid asked, Pakistan's position in global competitiveness and innovation rankings have been relatively low. What strategic initiatives do you propose to enhance Pakistan's global competitiveness and foster a cultural of innovation? And how can the government and private sector collaborate to achieve these goals?
So there are important policy decisions that we need to take for that to happen. एक तो जो बेसिक टूल्स ऑफ कम्पिटिटिवनेस हैं, जिसकी अभी हम इससे पहले वाले जवाब के अंदर हम बात कर रहे थे। अगर आपकी सोसाइटी के अंदर जो वर्कफोर्स है, उस वर्कफोर्स के अंदर स्किल लेवल ही नहीं है, तो जाहिर है वो कम्पिटिटिव कैसे होंगे? वो हाउ विल यू प्रोड्यूस द गुड्स uh, which the world needs if you don't have the appropriate level of skill in there. So एक तो वो वाला aspect है इसका tools वाला, and then obviously the infrastructure which is required to do that. आज की IT दुनिया के अंदर अगर आपने compete करना है, you need easy availability of broadband access होनी चाहिए, low cost पे availability होनी चाहिए, reliability होनी चाहिए. So there is this whole there is this knowledge and skills investment that needs to be made. There is the infrastructure that needs to be put in place. But there is also what I would call soft infrastructure. पाकिस्तान के अंदर इनोवेशन इसलिए नहीं होती है that the economic system does not reward innovation. पाकिस्तान में the economic system because of elite capture, जो मुझसे एजाज पहले सवाल पूछ रहा था, वो बहुत ही बड़ा प्रॉब्लम. वो सिर्फ he was asking in the context of the stock market operation, but it is a much bigger problem in the overall economy. Because elite capture है, the most successful are those who have got the right connections with Constitution Avenue in Islamabad or with GHQ in Pindi. And therefore the policy is not encouraging innovation. It's not those who are the most hardworking, the most innovative, the best risk takers who are winning. सो वो जो एक जोसेफ शुम्पेटर का एक कंपेटिटिव इकोनॉमी का जो एक फ्रेमवर्क है, वही नहीं पाकिस्तान के अंदर है. सो वी विल हैव टू मेक द इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द स्किल्स, मेक द इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, बट ऑल्सो अलाउ द इकोनॉमी टू बिकम ए जेन्युइन कंपेटिटिव इकोनॉमी एंड लेट द मार्केट बेस्ड डिसीजंस determine who is going to be successful and who is going to be a failure.
Thank you. And for our last question, it comes from Ali from University of Toronto. Even though you left the party, how do you still see yourself as a part of movement for justice? What do you advise our fellow students overseas to keep their interest for Pakistan with the current political and economic instability?
Yeah, very good question. So I have decided to drop out of active politics, but that doesn't mean that I have lost interest in Pakistan. That doesn't mean that I still don't have that desire to see Pakistan succeed. So if you're going to go stay connected with Pakistan, either while you're living in Pakistan or even if you're overseas and you're connected with Pakistan in some way or the other, you obviously want the country to be successful. You want it to be the kind of country that we all would want it to be. And it certainly isn't that at this point in time. So therefore, any contribution that you can make, that contribution can be through direct participation in the political process. It can be through your technical knowledge that you acquired. You're getting world-class education abroad. A lot of you will work overseas and gain experience and expertise working for world-class companies. That knowledge can be of great help for the development of Pakistan, and not just in the economic sense. It is there's a series of tweets that Salman Akram Raja has done today as an example. He's a lawyer. He's a world-class lawyer. He's a very fine mind, and he's trying to play a role in helping the country move towards the kind of 21st century liberal democracy that we want Pakistan to be. So it can be in the field of education, it can be in the field of politics, it can be in the field of business and economics. But those who have an interest in Pakistan must stay engaged and must try and make a difference. Aajkal to it's so easy. The kid is sitting in UFT. From UFT, he can operate a Facebook account, a Twitter account, and he can influence opinion in Pakistan. But be constructive and make constructive changes, key recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umar, for your insightful engagement with our audience's questions. Unfortunately, due to limited time, we must now bring this session to a close. I will now hand over once again to Myra for closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Lina. On that note, we will bring this incredibly insightful discussion to a close. Mr. Umar, thank you so very much for your time and insight. Your reflections on your personal journey, as well as your detailed exploration of Pakistan's current challenges, will serve as both guidance and inspiration for the young minds engaged with us today. I would like to now give you the opportunity to make any closing remarks.
Yeah, so in the end, I've enjoyed myself. I'm always available to the youth of Pakistan. It's energizing spending time with the youth. And, even in politics, when I was there, let's just say that not the nicest people in the world get drawn to the world of politics, and it drains your energy working with them. So whenever I wanted to feel energized again, I would go and sit with the youth and talk to them, and you feel energized again. I have faith in your generation. your level of awareness is way, way higher than what it was for my generation. And what we have what we have failed to achieve, I'm confident that your generation will do it. And I'll tell you, with all the difficulties that Pakistan has faced, and this is, and now I'm not trying to do a sell job on you for Pakistan. I'm saying what I genuinely believe in. I have seen, at least in my generation, those who believed in Pakistan and believed in themselves have been extremely successful, even in this country. There's nothing wrong with choosing to live abroad. Absolutely fine. But if you can find a way to be involved with the country and be able to contribute in any way, trust me, and I'm talking from personal experience. So it was, I think Nabiha was mentioning that earlier. $100,000 after tax, driving a 3,500 cc Ford Taurus, a house with 2 lawns. I came back to this small apartment with a Suzuki Cultus 1000 cc car with a salary which was 12,690 basic salary. And I was infinitely happier. I was infinitely happier. And I'll close on sharing with you why I made that move and what has driven me in my life, just so that you know how my mind works, and maybe some of you might want to take up that challenge yourselves. When I was working in Canada, उस वक्त सारी दुनिया के अंदर, including Exxon के अंदर, vision statements का fashion है. Everybody started developing vision statements. So हमारी Exxon की भी vision statement बनी. So I said, यार ये तो vision statement खेलना है, तो ये तो अच्छा game है, ये मैंने भी खेलना. So I want to have a vision statement for myself, for my life. And the vision statement that I crafted for myself in 1989 था या 90 था. I stuck to that for more than 3 decades. And it was very simple. At the end of my life, I want to be able to look back and say that I made a positive contribution to the economic lives of the people of Pakistan. So that if you have a vision like that, it helps you take decisions. It helps you make choices. So I'm not saying you necessarily need to have the vision that I had. I'm sure you'll be able to come up with even better vision. It doesn't necessarily even have to do with the country, you as a person. But do try and get that clarity in your mind. Something that really drives you. It makes you reach for the star while you keep your feet on the ground. Best of luck. I have, again, just my absolutely last word. I worked for a company which was Fortune 500, #1 company in the world, Exxon. I worked with another joint venture company, Mitsubishi, which was Fortune 500 #1 company. I have done academic programs at Harvard, Berkeley, Oxford, INSEAD. So I can say I've dealt with IMF, I've dealt with World Bank, etc., etc. So I can safely say I have dealt with the finest in the world. And I can tell you the brightest of Pakistan are as good as the best in the world. So you are as good as anybody in the world. You can achieve whatever you set your mind to. And my best wishes and prayers with you.
Thank you so much, sir, for those additional insights. I think we would all agree कि आपने अपनी vision statement से बढ़कर पाकिस्तान को facilitate किया. I would like to take this opportunity also to thank Nabiha and Azaz, our moderators for today, for their excellent guidance of the discussion. I would also like to thank Lina and Rai, my fellow hosts, for all their support on and off camera. And most importantly, as always, I must thank Areeb, the president of the PSA Coalition, who has worked tirelessly in the face of immense difficulty to bring this event to reality. Thank you for giving us all a platform from which we can connect with Pakistan, regardless of where we are in the world, and for your relentless passion and commitment. And on that wonderful note, thank you all so very much for taking the time. We look forward to seeing you at further PSA Coalition events soon.